I was standing in my driveway, loading groceries into my trunk, when a woman in a neon pink visor and matching athletic wear marched across my lawn like she owned the place. The fury in her eyes told me this wasn't going to be a friendly neighbor introduction, and I was right. "Excuse me, excuse me," she barked, waving a clipboard in my face. "You must be the new owner of this property. I'm Patricia Nielsen, president of the Meadowbrook HOA, and we need to discuss several violations immediately." I set down my grocery bag and turned to face her fully, already feeling my patience wearing thin. "I'm Carter Anderson, and I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not part of any HOA." Patricia's face turned the same shade as her visor. "Every property in Meadowbrook Falls, Arizona is part of our HOA. It's non-negotiable. Now, I need you to sign these forms, pay your backdated dues from the past 3 months, and more importantly, I need a set of your spare keys." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You want my house keys? Are you serious right now?" "It's standard protocol," she insisted, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "All HOA members must provide the board with a spare set of keys for safety purposes. In case of emergency, fire, or if we need to inspect your property for violations when you're not home." "Yeah, that's not happening," I said, grabbing my groceries again. "And like I said, I'm not in your HOA. This property was built before the neighborhood even existed. My grandfather built this house in 1987, and I inherited it last year. The HOA wasn't established until 2003, according to my research." Patricia's eyes narrowed into slits. "That's irrelevant. The covenant runs with the land. When you accepted the inheritance, you accepted the HOA obligations." "Show me the paperwork then," I challenged. "Because my lawyer went through everything during probate, and there's no HOA agreement attached to this property's deed." She sputtered for a moment, clearly not used to being contradicted. "I'll have our HOA attorney send you the documentation. But in the meantime, you're in violation of at least 6 different codes. Your grass is 2 inches over regulation height. You have an unauthorized vehicle in your driveway. Your mailbox is the wrong color. And don't even get me started on that garden shed." I glanced at my truck, the perfectly normal mailbox my grandfather installed decades ago, and the small shed where I kept my tools. "There's nothing wrong with any of that. The HOA standards clearly state that all mailboxes must be colonial blue. Grass cannot exceed 3 inches. No commercial vehicles can be parked in driveways, and all outbuildings require pre-approval from the architectural committee." "Good thing I'm not in your HOA then," I said, walking toward my front door. "Have a nice day." "You can't just ignore this," Patricia shrieked. "I'm filing a report and you'll be hearing from our lawyers, and I still need those keys." I shut the door behind me, wondering what kind of nightmare I'd just walked into. The house had been my grandfather's pride and joy, a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch on 2 acres of land right outside Scottsdale. He'd been a carpenter and built most of it with his own hands. When he passed away, leaving it to me in his will, I thought it was a blessing. I'd been living in a cramped apartment in Phoenix, working as a software engineer, and the idea of having my own space seemed perfect. Now I was dealing with an HOA Karen who thought she had the right to my house keys. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking and trying to forget about Patricia. But around 6 in the evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there she was again, this time with 2 other women flanking her like backup singers. "Mr. Anderson," Patricia said in a tone that suggested she was trying very hard to sound professional. "This is Deborah Montgomery and Susan Richards, our HOA vice president and treasurer. We've come to resolve this matter civilly." "There's nothing to resolve," I said. "I'm not part of your HOA. Deborah, A thin woman with severe gray hair stepped forward. "We've reviewed our records, and while your property predates the HOA when you inherited it, you should have been automatically enrolled. It's Arizona state law." "No, it isn't," I countered. Arizona law specifically states that pre-existing properties can only be forced into an HOA if the owner voluntarily agrees, or if there's a specific legal covenant that runs with the land. My property has neither. Susan, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, cleared her throat. "Look, this doesn't have to be difficult. Just pay the dues, give us the keys, and follow the rules. It's for everyone's benefit." "I'm not giving anyone my house keys," I said firmly. "That's insane. You have no legal right to access my property." Patricia's fake professional demeanor cracked. "It's a safety issue. What if there's a fire and we need to check on your property? What if there's a gas leak? What if we need to verify that you're maintaining the property standards? Then you call 911 like normal people," I said. "Or you knock on my door. You don't let yourselves in with spare keys like you own the place." "The HOA does have certain rights," Deborah insisted. "We have the authority to inspect properties for code violations." "Not my property," I repeated. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." I closed the door again, but I could hear them arguing on my porch for another 5 minutes before they finally left. I immediately called my lawyer, a guy named Robert Chen who'd handled my grandfather's estate. "Carter, good to hear from you," Robert said when he picked up. "How's the house?" "The house is great. The neighbors are a nightmare," I said, explaining the situation. Robert was quiet for a moment. "Okay, first things first. Don't give them anything. Not keys, not money, not even the time of day. Your grandfather's property is definitely not part of that HOA. We verified it during probate. The land deed is clean and there's no covenant. They're trying to bully you into compliance." "Can they do anything legally?" I asked. "They can try to sue, but they won't win. Arizona law is actually pretty clear on this. Pre-existing properties can't be forced into an HOA without explicit agreement. I'll draft a cease and desist letter tomorrow and send it to their board. That should back them off." "Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it." "No problem. And Carter, don't engage with them anymore. Let me handle all communication. These HOA types can be relentless, and you don't want to accidentally say something they can twist." I agreed and hung up, feeling slightly better, but that feeling didn't last long. The next morning, I woke up to find a bright orange sticker plastered on my front door. It was an official-looking violation notice from the Meadowbrook HOA, listing a dozen supposed infractions and threatening daily fines of $50 until they were corrected. At the bottom, in bold letters, it stated that failure to provide spare keys within 48 hours would result in additional penalties. I peeled off the sticker and took a photo of it, texting it to Robert immediately. Then I went about my morning routine, trying not to let it ruin my day. I had a video conference call with my team at 10, and I needed to focus. But around noon, as I was making lunch, I heard something at my back door. It sounded like someone was trying to open it. I rushed over and yanked it open to find Patricia standing there with a key in her hand, looking startled. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. "I'm conducting a safety inspection," she said, trying to regain her composure. "The back gate was unlocked, so I came to check the property." "Where did you get that key?" "It's a master key for all Meadowbrook properties," she said, holding it up like it was perfectly normal. I looked at the key and then at my lock. "That's not even for this door. Were you just trying random keys?" Her face flushed. "I have every right to inspect HOA properties." "Get off my property right now, or I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. Patricia huffed but backed away. "This isn't over. The HOA board will hear about your hostile behavior. Good. Tell them I said to stay off my land. I watched her storm across my backyard and through the gate that separated my property from the HOA community. Once she was gone, I checked all my doors and windows, making sure they were locked. Then I called a locksmith. I need to change all my locks, I told the guy who answered. Today, if possible. Sure thing. I can have someone out there in about 2 hours. What's the address? I gave him the information and spent the next 2 hours working while keeping an eye on the windows. I didn't trust Patricia not to come back with reinforcements. The locksmith, a friendly guy named Mike, showed up right on time. As he was examining my locks, he whistled low. These are old, original to the house. My grandfather installed them in the 80s, I said. Yeah, I can tell, good quality for the time, but definitely outdated. I'd recommend something with deadbolts and maybe a smart lock system for the front door. That way you can monitor who's coming and going. Perfect. Do it. Mike spent the next 3 hours upgrading every lock in the house. He installed smart locks on the front and back doors, heavy-duty deadbolts on all the side entrances, and even changed the locks on my shed and garage. There you go, he said, showing me how to use the app for the smart locks. You'll get alerts whenever someone approaches the doors, and you can see video footage from the built-in cameras. Nobody's getting in here without you knowing about it. I paid him, tipped him generously, and finally felt like I could breathe. My house was secure, and Patricia could try all the master keys she wanted. They wouldn't work. That evening, I decided to do some research on the Meadowbrook HOA. What I found was disturbing. Online forums were filled with complaints from actual HOA members about excessive fines, arbitrary rule enforcement, and constant harassment. One person claimed Patricia had entered their home without permission while they were on vacation and rearranged their furniture because it was visible through the windows and not aesthetically pleasing. Another said the HOA had put a lien on their house over a disputed $50 fine that snowballed into thousands with penalties and legal fees. I also found out that Patricia had been HOA president for 8 years, running unopposed because anyone who tried to challenge her was buried in violation notices and fines, until they either gave up or moved away. This woman was a tyrant, and she'd set her sights on me. The next day, I got a call from Robert. Good news and bad news. Good news is I sent the cease and desist letter. Bad news is the HOA's lawyer sent back a response claiming they have legal authority over your property based on a 2008 county ordinance. What ordinance? It doesn't exist. I checked. They're bluffing, hoping you don't have a lawyer who'll call them on it. I sent back a response telling them exactly that and threatening a harassment lawsuit if they don't back off. Think it'll work? With reasonable people, yes. With HOA zealots, hard to say. Robert was right to be skeptical. That afternoon, I found another violation notice on my door, this time claiming my truck was leaking oil on the driveway, which was an environmental hazard and subject to immediate fines. I checked under my truck. There was no oil leak. I took photos documenting this and sent them to Robert. Then things escalated. 2 days later, I came home from a grocery run to find that someone had placed a boot on my truck's wheel. Not a police boot or a repo boot. A bright orange boot with the HOA logo painted on the side. There was a note attached saying my vehicle was being immobilized due to unpaid fines and violations. I stared at it in disbelief. This was beyond harassment. This was actually illegal. I called the Scottsdale Police Department and explained the situation. A deputy showed up within 20 minutes, a young guy named Officer Martinez who looked at the boot and shook his head. Yeah, they can't do that, he said. This is private property that's not part of the HOA. Even if it was, they'd need a court order to immobilize your vehicle. This is vandalism at minimum, possibly theft of use. Can you remove it? I asked. I'll have to call a tow company to cut it off, but first, let me get some photos and a statement. He started documenting everything, asking me questions about the HOA situation. When I told him about Patricia trying to get my keys and attempting to enter my house, his expression darkened. Has she tried to access your property without permission more than once? At least twice that I know of. Once at the back door with what she claimed was a master key, and I suspect she or someone from the HOA put this boot on. Officer Martinez nodded. I'm going to file a report. If she shows up again and tries to enter your property, call 911 immediately. That's attempted breaking and entering. He called a tow company, and within an hour they'd cut off the boot. Officer Martinez took it as evidence. I'm going to have a chat with this HOA president, he said. This kind of behavior isn't acceptable. I thanked him and thought maybe that would be the end of it, but I should have known better. The next morning I woke up to the sound of construction. Heavy machinery, beeping trucks, the works. I stumbled outside in my pajamas to find a work crew digging up the edge of my driveway where it met the road. What's going on? I called out to one of the workers. HOA ordered us to install a new sidewalk along this section, he shouted back over the noise. Should be done in a few days. They ordered you onto my property. The worker looked confused. This is HOA property, isn't it? That's what the work order says. I ran back inside and called Robert. They've got a construction crew digging up my driveway. What? Okay, I'm calling them right now. Do not let them continue working. I went back outside and approached the foreman. I need you to stop. This is private property, and the HOA has no authority here. The foreman pulled out his tablet and showed me a map. According to this, the first 6 feet from the road is HOA common area. That map is wrong. My property line extends to the road. I have the survey to prove it. The foreman sighed. Look, buddy, I don't want to get in the middle of a property dispute. I've got a work order and a check from the HOA. If you've got a problem with it, take it up with them. If you continue working, you're trespassing and I will call the police, I said firmly. That made him pause. He got on his phone and called someone, presumably the HOA. After a heated discussion, he hung up and turned to his crew. Pack it up. We're leaving until this gets sorted out. What? A voice shrieked from behind me. Patricia came marching down the street, clipboard in hand as always. You can't stop work on HOA property. This isn't HOA property, I said tiredly. The sidewalk easement clearly falls under HOA jurisdiction, she insisted. We're improving the neighborhood and you're being obstructive. The foreman held up his hands. Madam, sir, I'm not working on property with a disputed claim. You two figure it out, then call us back. He and his crew loaded up their equipment and drove off. Patricia whirled on me. This is costing the HOA money. Every delay is coming out of our budget and it's your fault. Then stop trying to work on my property without permission, I shot back. If you had just given us the keys like I asked, we could have coordinated this while you were at work, and you'd never even have noticed, she said. And I realized that was the whole point. She wanted my keys so she could do whatever she wanted on my property without my knowledge or consent. Stay off my land, Patricia, I said, turning to go back inside. She grabbed my arm. Don't you walk away from me. I am the HOA president and you will show me respect. I yanked my arm free. Touch me again and I'll press charges for assault. I mean it. Her face contorted with rage, but she didn't follow me. I went inside and immediately called Officer Martinez, telling him what happened. He said he'd send a patrol car by to document the incident and told me to keep recording everything. Robert called me back 20 minutes later. Okay, I've had enough. I'm filing a restraining order against Patricia Nielsen on your behalf, and I'm also filing a harassment lawsuit against the HOA. This has gone way beyond a simple property dispute. Will that work? It'll take time, but yes. We have documented evidence of repeated trespassing, harassment, attempted breaking and entering, and now possible assault. A judge will see this for what it is. In the meantime, I'm also going to contact the county and get a surveyor out there to officially document your property lines. That'll shut down any claims about easements or HOA land. Thanks, Robert. I don't know what I'd do without you. Just hang tight and don't engage with them anymore. Let the legal system handle it. That was easier said than done. Over the next week, Patricia seemed to make it her personal mission to ruin my life. She sent me daily letters threatening legal action, claiming I owed thousands in backdated HOA dues and fines. She organized other HOA members to drive by my house slowly, taking photos and videos. She even called code enforcement on me, claiming I was running an illegal business from my home because I worked remotely. The code enforcement officer who showed up was apologetic. "Sir, we've gotten 3 calls this week about this property. I can see you're not running a business. Working from home isn't illegal. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." "It's the HOA president," I explained. "She's harassing me." He nodded knowingly. "Yeah, we get a lot of calls from her. Between you and me, most of them are bogus, but we have to respond to every complaint." The surveyor came out and confirmed what I already knew. My property line extended all the way to the road. There was no easement, no HOA common area. It was all mine. Robert had the survey results notarized and sent copies to the HOA board and their lawyer. That seemed to quiet things down for about 48 hours. Then I got an email from my homeowner's insurance company. They were canceling my policy due to excessive risk and unresolved property violations. When I called to ask what they were talking about, the agent sounded confused. "We received documentation from the Meadowbrook HOA stating your property has multiple code violations, unpermitted structures, and you've refused to address fire hazards. Based on that information, we determined the property is too high risk to insure." "That's all false," I said. "The HOA is harassing me because I won't join them. Can I send you documentation proving my property is in good condition?" "Of course. If you can provide that, we'll review the cancellation." I spent the next 2 hours gathering photos, the recent survey, and a statement from Robert about the harassment. I sent it all to the insurance company, and they agreed to reinstate my policy. But the fact that Patricia had gone after my insurance was a new level of vindictive. Robert was furious when I told him. That might actually be insurance fraud. If she knowingly provided false information to get your policy canceled, that's a crime. I'm adding it to the lawsuit. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I took the day off work and met Robert at the Maricopa County Courthouse. Patricia showed up with the HOA's lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit, who immediately tried to negotiate. "My client is willing to drop all claims and fines if Mr. Anderson agrees to leave the HOA alone and stops interfering with neighborhood improvements," he offered. "Your client has been harassing my client for weeks," Robert countered. "We're not negotiating. We want a restraining order and damages." The hearing lasted about 30 minutes. I presented all my evidence. Photos of the violation notices, video from my smart doorbell showing Patricia trying to open my back door, the police report about the boot, statements from Officer Martinez, and the insurance company incident. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened to everything and then turned to Patricia. "Miss Nielsen, Do you have any explanation for this behavior? Patricia launched into a rant about how I was destroying property values and refusing to comply with reasonable neighborhood standards. The judge cut her off. Miss Nielsen, Mr. Anderson's property is not part of your HOA. The survey clearly shows that. You have repeatedly trespassed, harassed, and interfered with his property rights. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to stay at least 100 yards away from Mr. Anderson and his property at all times. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Patricia's face turned purple, but she nodded. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering you and the HOA to cease all contact with Mr. Anderson except through legal counsel. No more letters, no more violation notices, no more calls to code enforcement or insurance companies. If I see you back in this courtroom for violating this order, you'll be facing criminal charges. We left the courthouse, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. Robert clapped me on the shoulder. That went well. Now we wait for the lawsuit to proceed, but this should keep her off your back in the meantime. I drove home feeling victorious. Maybe now I could actually enjoy my grandfather's house in peace, but Patricia wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 days after the restraining order was issued, I woke up to find my mailbox had been knocked over. It looked like someone had hit it with a car or a baseball bat. I checked my doorbell camera footage and saw a dark sedan driving by around 3 in the morning, slowing down near my mailbox. The angle wasn't great, but I could see someone swing something out the window before the mailbox went down. I called Officer Martinez and filed a report. He came by to look at the damage and reviewed the footage. Can't make out the license plate, but that's definitely intentional destruction of property. I'll increase patrols in this area. I replaced the mailbox with a heavy-duty steel one set in concrete. If they wanted to knock it down again, they'd need more than a baseball bat. The next incident came a week later. I came home from a grocery run to find that someone had dumped a pile of mulch at the end of my driveway, completely blocking access to my garage. There was a note stuck to it. HOA approved landscaping materials. You're welcome. This was beyond petty. I called a landscaping company to haul it away, which cost me $200. I added it to the growing list of damages for the lawsuit. Robert filed a motion to hold Patricia in contempt of court for violating the restraining order. We couldn't prove she was personally responsible for the mailbox or the mulch, but the judge agreed it was suspicious given the timing and the note. She ordered Patricia to appear in court again. At that hearing, the judge was even less patient. Miss Nielsen, if anything else happens to Mr. Anderson's property, I will assume you're responsible and you will face criminal charges. Am I making myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said through gritted teeth. That seemed to do the trick. For the next month, things were quiet. I settled into a routine with work, started fixing up the house the way I'd always planned, and even met some of my actual neighbors who weren't part of the HOA. They were nice people who'd all had their own problems with Patricia over the years. One of them, an elderly man named George who lived on the other side of me, came over one afternoon with a 6-pack of beer. Heard you've been having trouble with the HOA queen, he said. You could say that, I replied, accepting a beer. She tried to get me to join when they first formed that HOA, George said. Told her where she could stick it. My property's been in my family since the 60s. No way I'm giving some busybody power over my own land. How'd you avoid the harassment? Got a mean dog and a meaner lawyer, George chuckled. Also helped that my son's a cop. She knew better than to mess with me. But I've seen what she does to people who can't fight back. She's driven out at least 5 families over the years. That's insane. Power corrupts, George said simply. Give someone a little authority, and some of them turn into tyrants. Patricia's always been like that, even before the HOA. She was on the school board for a while, made everyone miserable there too. We talked for a while longer, and George gave me some tips on maintaining the property. He also mentioned that several other HOA members were unhappy with Patricia's leadership, but were too scared to speak up. They might be interested in what you're doing, he said. Taking her to court and all might give them courage to vote her out. It was an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that my lawsuit might have wider implications for the neighborhood. The lawsuit moved slowly through the legal system, as lawsuits do. Robert kept me updated on the progress. The HOA's insurance company was now involved, trying to settle out of court to avoid a trial. They offered $5,000 to make it all go away. Not even close, Robert told them. My client has documented damages exceeding that, plus emotional distress and legal fees. We want $50,000 and a formal apology. The negotiations dragged on for weeks. Meanwhile, I focused on my life and tried to forget about the HOA drama. I'd started dating someone I met through a friend, a teacher named Jessica who thought the whole HOA situation was hilarious. She actually wanted your house keys. Jessica laughed when I told her the story over dinner. That's completely insane. Tell me about it. Who does that? Power-hungry suburban dictators, Jessica said. I had a friend who lived in an HOA that tried to fine her for having the wrong color Christmas lights. She ended up selling the house just to get away from them. I'm not selling, I said firmly. This was my grandfather's house. It means too much to me. Good. Don't let them win. Things were actually going well for a few months. Work was good, my relationship with Jessica was developing nicely, and the house was starting to feel like home. I'd even started a garden in the backyard, growing tomatoes and peppers like my grandfather used to. Then, one evening in late September, I got a call from Officer Martinez. Mr. Anderson, I wanted to give you a heads up. We arrested Patricia Nielsen today. What? For what? Breaking and entering, trespassing, and attempted theft. She was caught on camera trying to break into another property in the HOA. The homeowner had set up security cameras after reporting some items missing from their garage, caught her red-handed trying to get in through a window. I was stunned. Why would she do that? According to her statement, she was conducting an HOA inspection, but the homeowner never gave permission and she didn't have keys. She actually tried to argue that, as HOA president, she had the right to enter any property in the community for compliance checks. That's what she tried to tell me, I said. That's why she wanted my keys. Yeah, well, it's illegal, very illegal. The homeowner is pressing charges, and based on your prior complaints and the restraining order, the DA is looking at a pattern of behavior. She might be facing serious jail time. After we hung up, I sat there processing the information. Patricia had been arrested. The woman who'd made my life hell for months was facing criminal charges. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part just felt sad that it had come to this. Robert called me the next day with an update. The HOA's insurance company just called. They want to settle immediately. They're offering $75,000 and a written apology from the board. $75,000. They're worried about the criminal case against Patricia. If it comes out during a trial that she's been systematically harassing and trespassing on people's properties while acting as HOA president, the organization could face massive liability. They want to contain the damage. What do you think I should do? Take it. It's a good offer, and honestly, you've already won. Patricia's out as HOA president. The board voted to remove her yesterday after she was arrested. They're scrambling to do damage control. I thought about it for a moment. The money would more than cover my legal fees and all the damages, plus compensation for months of stress and harassment. And more importantly, Patricia was facing justice through the criminal system. Okay, let's settle. The settlement was finalized within 2 weeks. I received a check for $75,000 and a formal letter from the new HOA board apologizing for Patricia's behavior and confirming, in writing, that my property was not part of the HOA and would never be subject to their rules or regulations. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for November. Robert kept me updated as I was listed as a potential witness. The DA had built a strong case, including testimony from multiple homeowners who'd experienced similar harassment. It turned out Patricia had been using master keys to enter HOA properties without permission for years, going through people's homes looking for violations, and in some cases, taking items she deemed inappropriate for the neighborhood aesthetic. One woman testified that Patricia had entered her home and removed a garden gnome from her mantel, leaving a violation notice in its place. Another couple said Patricia had rearranged their outdoor furniture while they were at work because it didn't match the approved color scheme. The evidence of her pattern of behavior was overwhelming. In the end, Patricia pleaded guilty to multiple counts of trespassing and 1 count of attempted burglary. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution to all the homeowners she'd harassed. She was also permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Arizona. I attended the sentencing hearing. Patricia looked smaller somehow, diminished without her clipboard and her authority. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she gave a rambling speech about how she'd only been trying to maintain property values and keep the neighborhood nice. She never apologized. After the hearing, several of the other homeowners came up to thank me. "If you hadn't fought back, we might never have known the extent of what she was doing," one man said. "Thank you for standing up to her." I shook his hand. "I just didn't want anyone having my house keys." That got a laugh from the small group that had gathered. We exchanged contact information, and a few of them mentioned they were working to reform the HOA from within, making it less authoritarian and more focused on actual community building rather than petty rule enforcement. The new HOA president, a reasonable guy named Tom who actually seemed interested in serving the community rather than controlling it, reached out to me a few weeks later. "I know you're not part of the HOA, and you have no reason to trust us after what Patricia put you through," he said. "But we're having a neighborhood barbecue next month and we'd love for you to come. No strings attached, just neighbors being neighborly." I appreciated the gesture and told him I'd think about it. I did end up going, bringing Jessica with me. It was actually pleasant. People were friendly, the food was good, and nobody asked me for my house keys or threatened to fine me for anything. George was there too, looking amused by the whole thing. "Never thought I'd see the day when the HOA threw a party without a hidden agenda," he said. "Times change," I replied. "Thanks to you mostly. You stood your ground. Respect." As the evening wound down and I stood in my backyard looking at my grandfather's house, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since I'd inherited the place. The house was mine, truly mine, without anyone trying to exert control over it. The locks had all been changed, not just physically but metaphorically too. Jessica came up beside me and took my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I really am." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I continued working from home, occasionally seeing Jessica and slowly fixing up the house. I replaced the old siding, updated the kitchen, and built a new deck in the backyard. Every improvement I made, I thought about my grandfather and how proud he'd be. The HOA drama became a story I told at parties, something that seemed almost unbelievable in retrospect. People always had the same reaction: disbelief that someone would demand house keys from strangers, followed by horror at the extent of Patricia's harassment, and finally relief that justice had been served. I kept the settlement money in a savings account, using some of it for home improvements and putting the rest away for the future. It felt like compensation not just for the harassment, but for having to fight for something that should have been mine by right in the first place. One afternoon, about 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, I was working in my garden when Tom from the HOA stopped by. "Hey, Carter, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I wanted to update you on some changes we've made to the HOA. We've rewritten a lot of the bylaws, made them more reasonable. No more requirements for spare keys, no more arbitrary fines, and we've established a real appeals process for violations. We're also limiting the president's authority. Everything has to go through a board vote now." "That sounds like real progress," I said, genuinely impressed. "It is. And I wanted to thank you again. What you did, fighting back against Patricia, it opened a lot of people's eyes. We realized we'd given one person too much power and it corrupted the whole organization. We're trying to do better." "I appreciate that, Tom." He hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to apologize personally. I was on the board back when Patricia first started harassing you. I should have stood up to her then, but I didn't. I was a coward and I'm sorry. I respected the honesty. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for working to fix things now." After he left, I thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If I'd been someone without the resources to hire a lawyer, or if I'd been intimidated into giving Patricia those keys, who knows what would have happened. She might have continued her reign of terror indefinitely, entering homes without permission, destroying people's sense of security and privacy in their own properties. The thought made me angry all over again, but also grateful. Grateful for Robert's help, for Officer Martinez's professionalism, for judges who saw through Patricia's justifications and held her accountable. The system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. George passed away that winter, peacefully in his sleep at age 87. His family asked me to speak at his funeral since we'd become friends in his last year. I talked about his independence, his refusal to be bullied, and his kindness to a new neighbor dealing with a difficult situation. After the service, his son thanked me. "Dad really liked you," he said. "He said you reminded him of himself when he was younger, stubborn in the best way." "He was a good man," I replied. "I'm glad I got to know him." George's property went to his son, who also declined to join the HOA. Some traditions are worth maintaining. Jessica and I got engaged that spring. I proposed in the backyard, under the old oak tree my grandfather had planted when he first built the house. She said yes, and we started planning a wedding for the following year. "Are we going to live here?" she asked one evening as we sat on the deck watching the sunset. "Is that okay with you?" "Are you kidding? After everything you fought for to keep this place, of course we're living here. Besides, I love this house. It has character and good security," she added with a grin. "The best locks money can buy," I agreed. We were married in October, a small ceremony in the backyard with close friends and family. Tom and several of the reformed HOA members came, bringing gifts and well wishes. Even Officer Martinez stopped by to congratulate us. It felt like a true community celebration, the kind my grandfather would have loved. As Jessica and I danced under string lights hung between the trees, I thought about how much had changed in just under 2 years. I'd inherited a house, fought off an HOA tyrant, changed all my locks literally and figuratively, found love and built a real life in this place. Patricia was released from jail after serving a year of her sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to Nevada to live with her sister. Nobody seemed sad to see her go. The HOA continued its reforms, slowly rebuilding its reputation and its relationship with the community. I never forgot the lesson, though. Property rights matter. Privacy matters. The right to security in your own home, to control who has access to your personal space, those aren't trivial things. They're fundamental. And when someone tries to take them away, whether through intimidation, harassment, or abuse of perceived authority, you have to stand up and fight back. My grandfather built this house with his own hands, board by board, nail by nail. He built it to last, to be a home for his family for generations. When Patricia demanded my spare keys, she wasn't just asking for pieces of metal. She was demanding access to my inheritance, my privacy, my autonomy. She was trying to take control of something that wasn't hers to control. I'm glad I said no. I'm glad I changed the locks. I'm glad I fought back. And I'm especially glad that when I come home every evening, I unlock my door with my own key, knowing that I'm the only one who has access. That this space is truly mine, protected and secure, just as my grandfather intended it to be. Jessica was pregnant by the following summer. We started converting my grandfather's old workshop into a nursery, keeping his workbench and tools but adding a crib and changing table. Our daughter was born in March, a healthy 7-pound baby girl with her mother's eyes and, according to Jessica, my stubborn streak. We named her Carol after my grandfather Carl. When I held her for the first time in that house, in the room where my grandfather used to build furniture and fix things, I felt a connection across generations. This house had been built by his hands, defended by mine, and would now be home to another generation. The neighborhood continued to evolve. More young families moved in, attracted by the good schools and the reformed, reasonable HOA. Tom served 2 terms as president before stepping down, and the board continued to function with transparency and actual democratic processes. They even started publishing detailed financial reports and holding open meetings where any homeowner could voice concerns. It was, people said, what an HOA should have been from the beginning. I kept in touch with Robert, who'd become something of a friend through the whole ordeal. He told me the case had become something of a legend in local legal circles, a cautionary tale about HOA overreach and the importance of clearly established property rights. "You should write a book about it," he joked once over coffee. "Nobody would believe it," I replied. A woman demanding spare keys for safety purposes, trying to break into houses, getting arrested for it. It sounds too crazy to be real. "The truth is stranger than fiction," Robert said. "Besides, it might help other people dealing with HOA harassment, show them they can fight back." Maybe he was right. But for now, I was content to live my life, raise my daughter, love my wife, and maintain my grandfather's house. The drama was over. The locks had been changed. Life was good. On Carol's first birthday, we had a party in the backyard. Family, friends, neighbors, all gathered to celebrate. As I watched my daughter smash her face into a cake, covered in frosting and giggling with pure joy, I thought about Patricia and her clipboard and her demands for keys. She'd wanted control, power, the ability to dictate how other people lived their lives. What she'd gotten instead was arrest, prosecution, and exile from the community she'd tried to dominate. Meanwhile, I'd gotten everything she'd tried to take from me. Security, privacy, peace, and a home filled with love. In the end, it wasn't even close to a fair trade. Not for her anyway. For me, it was perfect. The house still stands on its 2 acres, just outside Scottsdale, Arizona. The locks are modern and secure. The property lines are clearly established and documented. And the only people with keys are me and Jessica. Inside, pictures of my grandfather hang on the walls. His tools are displayed in the workshop. And his legacy lives on through the home he built and the family that continues to thrive within it. And if anyone ever asks me why I was so stubborn about not giving up those keys, why I spent money on lawyers and fought so hard over what seemed like a simple request, I tell them the truth. Because they weren't just keys. They were the principle of the thing. The idea that my home is my castle, that I get to decide who enters and when, that nobody, not an HOA president or anyone else, has the right to demand access to my private space. My grandfather understood that when he built this house. I understood it when I inherited it. And I'll teach my daughter to understand it too. Some things are worth fighting for. Your home is one of them. Your keys are another. And the right to change your locks and keep out people who mean you harm, whether physical or otherwise, is fundamental. Patricia Nielsen learned that lesson the hard way. I'm just glad I never had to learn it at all. I knew it from the start and I never wavered. The locks have been changed. The house is secure. My family is safe. And that, in the end, is all that really matters.